What is up, YouTube? We are back with another Pokemon tier list, and today we are looking at the Paradox Pokemon. We're going to be looking at all the Paradox Pokemon that are in Scarlet and Violet. As of now, we're going to go ahead and exclude Walking Wake and Iron Leaves, as they're not really farmable, and they were available for a limited time event. They will be back in the game later on when DLC comes out, but we're going to go ahead and ignore them for this time in this video. And if you guys go on to enjoy this content, to consider leaving a like, subscribing, and turning on that notification bell, as I'm going to continue making tier lists. We did a starter tier list that was pretty successful. Now we're on to Paradox Pokemon. If you guys have any suggestions down below, or you want to debate what some of my opinions throughout this video, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. Let's go ahead and get into the tier list. So the first Pokemon we're looking at here is Brute Bonnet. Now, if we want to go ahead and look at Brute Bonnet's stats, we can see that it has pretty decent HP, above average attack, and then pretty average defense and special defense there. Obviously, it's a very slow Pokemon, but it's not too bad there. Looking at some of its moves, it can get things like Spore and Rage Powder, as well as Giga Drain, Crunch, and Close Combat. So some good coverage there. It's pretty strong against ground, water, rock, and ghost type Pokemon. It is weak to quite a few things: fighting, flying, poison, ice, fire, fairy, and 4 times weak to bug. Got some resistances here: ground, ghost, water, dark, electric, and grass psychic. It's kind of a middle of the road Pokemon, I would say. Honestly, it is actually pretty good in competitive. I've used it with, to some success. So definitely not the worst Pokemon. I'm gonna go ahead and put it here in B tier because I don't think it's one of the greatest Pokemon there is. Next up, we've got Roaring Moon, so another Scarlet Pokemon. It is a Dragon and Dark type Pokemon. It's got decent HP, above average attack, pretty poor defense. Obviously, it's definitely not a special attacker, and pretty decent special defense and speed. So not too bad there stat-wise. Obviously, all these Pokemon have 570 on their stats. Some of the moves that Roaring Moon gets access to are moves like Breaking Swipe and Snarl, so those are great for damage mitigation, reducing attack and special attack. It's got access to things like Earthquake and Acrobatics for some fun shenanigans. It is strong against other Dragon type Pokemon and Ghost type Pokemon. Not too many strengths it has. It is weak to Fighting, Bug, Ice, Dragon, Fairy, having that 4 times weakness to Fairy. Resist types like Ghost, Fire, Water, Grass, Electric, and Dark. So not too bad. It does have access to Dragon Dance, and it can be okay. It's got some good applications in PvP and okay applications in PvE. I've used it for a couple raids, setting up Dragon Dance and using things like Throat Chop. Not too bad. For now, we're going to go ahead and put it in B tier. We're now moving on to Iron Valiant. So Iron Valiant is kind of fun. Let's go ahead and pull up its stats. Looking here at Iron Valiant's stats. So the problem with Iron Valiant is obviously it being a fairy and fighting type Pokemon. It's got a bit of a mix there. Luckily for it, it has good attack and good special attack, so you can kind of go whichever way you want. However, resistance wise, it's got okay defense, but pretty poor special defense. It's got decent speed. Obviously, being a fairy fighting type Pokemon, it does have access to moves such as Moonblast, Close Combat, other things like that. It can also get Leaf Blade, Night Slash, Psycho Cut. So pretty good offensive options there as far as physical moves. It is, because of that fighting type, we're strong against Rock, Ice, Steel, Dark, and normal type Pokemon. With that fairy typing, it's good against Dragon and Dark as well as fighting. So you've got a couple of strengths there against fighting. It is weak to Flying, Poison, Steel, Psychic, and Fairy. And resist fighting, rock, bug, and dark. So it's not too bad. I do actually like Iron Valiant. It's definitely a really fun offensive class to use. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in A tier. Let me know what you guys think about that choice. Next up, we've got Iron Thorns. So Iron Thorns is basically a different form of Tyranitar. It's got average HP, pretty good attack, pretty good defense. Not the best special attack or special defense. It's not really used for that. It is pretty slow as a Pokemon. It has access to a variety of moves such as Wild Charge, Stone Edge, Earthquake. It's not too bad. It is strong against Ice type, Flying type Bug, and Water type Pokemon. However, it is weak to fighting. Also weak to water because of that rock typing, grass, ground, does have a 4 times weakness to ground. So honestly, I prefer Tyranitar there. It does have a 4 times weakness to fighting, but I've never really used Iron Thorns, and I don't see really too much use for it over Tyranitar itself. Next up, we've got Great Tusk. So looking here at Great Tusk, it's got pretty darn good HP, pretty good attack and defense, very good attack and defense actually. Pretty poor special attack and special defense, more of a physical attacking type Pokemon, so having that really good attack and defense there is pretty solid for it. Okay, speed, not too bad. Some of the moves it has access to include Headlong Rush, Close Combat, Mega Horn. It is strong against Electric, Rock, Ice, Steel, Fire, Poison, and Dark. It is weak to Flying, Water, Grass, Psychic, and Fairy. So Fairy, you gotta be careful there. But it does have some pretty good usage, and in fact, there's a one-shot setup for basically any Pokemon that is weak to Ground-type Pokemon. So we're gonna go ahead and put Great Tusk in the A tier. It's solid, pretty good, hard-hitting Pokemon. Next up, we've got Koraidon. Honestly, Koraidon doesn't really need too much introduction there. Obviously, being a fighting Dragon-type Pokemon, it's basically Iron Hands on crack. It's very strong physically. It's very fast. It's got some decent defensive stats. Obviously, it being a legendary, has 670 total stats. It's very, very good. We're not really going to spend too much time there on Koraidon. It is incredibly useful. Pretty solid against the Samurott raid, as you can basically solo with it using Fire Fang. It is pretty solid against any raids that are weak to fighting type Pokemon. Moving on to Iron Jugulus. So Iron Jugulus, in my opinion, is a pretty mid Pokemon. It's got average speed and above average special attack. It's not very defensive in any way, shape, or form, whether that be defense or special defense. It doesn't have any really impressive stats. If you're looking at Iron Jugulus, honestly, I would go ahead and go with Hydreigon, as I think it's a better fit. So for me, Iron Jugulus is kind of just going to go in the C tier. All right, and now we're moving on to Iron Hands. So looking here at Iron Hands stats, it's got excellent HP, excellent attack, pretty good defense, really poor special defense and speed. But it does hit incredibly hard. It hits a lot of Pokemon types pretty hard. It's got access to some pretty good moves. Obviously, it's got Drain Punch, Close Combat, Earthquake, Wild Charge, and its kind of big advantage is that it has access to Belly Drum. So it's great for Terra raids. It is strong against normal Rock, Ice, Steel, Water, and Flying type raids. Of course, being fighting and Electric, it is weak to Ground, Psychic, and Fairy. Not too bad there on the resistances. Obviously, this is a really, really great option for Terra raids, and I would imagine a lot of you, if not all of you, have one of these already built. It was my first shiny that I went and hunted in Pokemon Violet, so it goes right into the S tier. Next up, we've got Iron Treads. Looking at Iron Treads, it's got average HP, pretty good attack, better defense, and pretty poor special defense. It's kind of one of its weaknesses. It's got decent speed. Of the Pokemon with the word iron in their name, it's the only one to actually be a steel type Pokemon, so I guess there's a funny little advantage there. It has access to moves like Steel Roller, Earthquake, Rock Slide, Body Press, plenty of options there for coverage. Being a steel type Pokemon, it resists a ton of types. Let's go ahead and list them off here. Normal, Flying, Rock, Bug, Steel, Psychic, Dragon, Fairy, Poison, and Electric. It is super effective against Fairy, Rock, Ice, Electric, and Steel. So it's got quite a bit of strengths there. It is only weak to Fighting, Ground, Fire, and Water. Probably a pretty good Pokemon for raids. I've honestly not used one myself, but given its typings and its usage there, it's actually probably really, really good in like PvP, giving that type coverage. I have come across it a few times. We're going to go ahead and drop it in the A tier. Next up, we've got Iron Moth. So looking here at Iron Moth's stats, we have pretty excellent special attack, decent, pretty good special defense and speed. Not much HP to talk about. So this is more of your hyper offensive type of Pokemon. Very good as a special attacker. Some of the moves it has access to would include Overheat, Bug Buzz, Hurricane. It is strong against Grass, Ice, Steel, and Fairy type Pokemon. It is 4 times weak to ground because of its Poison and Fire typing there, so that's kind of a bit of a disadvantage. It's also weak to Rock, Water, and Psychic. Resists quite a few. It's got resistance to Fighting, Poison, Bug, Steel, Fire, grass, ice, and fairy. So not too bad. I wouldn't put it in S tier, but I would say it's probably pretty good here at A tier. Do see it a lot in PvP with different kind of setups to buff it up really quick and make it incredibly overpowered. Next up, we've got Screamtail. Looking here at Screamtail's stats, it's got pretty good HP and defense, as well as even better special defense and decent speed. Its big downside is the fact that it has poor attack and poor special attack. So it's a pretty good bulky, like supportive kind of Pokemon. Doesn't have access to a lot of offensive firepower. It does have access to Perish Song. It's got access to a few moves such as Psychic Fang, Play Rough, Gyro Ball. So it's got some coverage there. It is strong against Poison, Dark, Dragon, and Fighting type Pokemon. It is weak to Poison because of the Fairy typing, Ghost, and Steel. So not the best defensiveness there. It also resists Fighting, Psychic, and Dragon. Nothing too terribly special, honestly, outside of some few situations, such as, for example, Wolfie winning a championship with it. Honestly, I would put Screamtail in the C tier. If it's a Pokemon you like, then it's a Pokemon you like. Otherwise, it's just not too incredibly special. Next up, we've got one of my favorite Pokemon in Flutter Mane. So Flutter Mane has really poor HP and attack, which doesn't matter, as well as defense, but it's got incredible special attack, special defense, and speed. Actually, really great even split there between those things, 135 in each of those stats. So very good there. Flutter Mane has access to moves such as Moonblast, Shadow Ball, Icy Wind. There's not a lot of things in the competitive meta that Flutter Mane can't hit very hard. It hits Ghost, Fighting, Dragon, Dark. It is weak to Ghost and Steel only. And of course, you've got Terastallization there you can take advantage of. You can make it a Fire Terra or Fairy Terra, whatever you want to do, depending on whether you want to go offensive or defensive. It is resistant to Bug, Normal, Fighting, and Dragon. Actually, it is immune to Dragon because of that Fairy typing. Flutter Mane was one of the Pokemon that people used early on against the 7-star Charizard. It is very fast, very offensive. It earns itself a spot in the S tier. Next up, we've got Sandy Shocks. Looking at the stats here, it is below average in HP, attack, decent defense, very good special attack, and some decent speed. Okay special defense, definitely more of an attacking type Pokemon. So not too bad as far as stats. Definitely nothing defensive, more on the glass cannon type, you could say. It does have access to moves like Earth Power, Thunderbolt, Substitute, to name just a few. It is strong against Electric, Steel, Fire, Rock, Water, Flying. It is weak to Ground, weak to Water, Grass, and Ice. It is immune to Electric, but also resistant to Flying, Poison, Rock, and Steel. So for me, Sandy Shocks is kind of a mid Pokemon, pretty average. I don't know if I would put it up with Iron Valiant, Great Tusk, Treads, and Moth. I would definitely put it in the B tier. I have a lot of fun with it in PvP when I battle my viewers. They just don't really have a good counter for it, but that's pretty situational. I have some success with it in competitive as well. Next up, we've got Miraidon. Miraidon is a really simple S tier. It is perfect against any kind of water and flying type raids. It hits incredibly hard in those raids. In fact, it's basically my only choice for those kinds of raids. Used it in the flying Decidueye raid to basically just own that pretty easily. No need to really go over stats or moves there. Obviously, it's got access to moves like Electro Drift. It can set up with Charge, has things like Metal Sound, which is basically the Screech version for special defense. Moving on now, we've got Iron Bundle. Iron Bundle is a fun Pokemon, definitely more of a glass cannon, has a pretty decent defense actually, given its typing. Of course, it is an ice type Pokemon, so it does have a lot of weaknesses there, being ice, not being one of the most resistant typings. It does have a water type there to kind of help with some of those weaknesses, but it has excellent special attack and even more excellent speed. So definitely a very offensive type of Pokemon. One that is very fun to use in competitive. I don't think I'd ever take it into a raid just because of that really poor HP stat. But again, it has access to moves like Freeze Dry, Hydro Pump, Icy Wind, and some more options there. It is strong against Dragon, Flying, Ground, Fire, and Rock. weak to fighting rock, grass, and electric, and only resist water and ice. One of the downsides to it being a water type Pokemon, and then having that ice combination as well. So we're going to go ahead and put Iron Bundle probably in B tier, honestly. And next and last of all, we have Slitherwing. Looking at Slitherwing's stats, it's got below average HP, some pretty decent attack, but nothing else really stands out too much. It's got average special defense. Everything else is kind of below average, so definitely stat-wise a little bit lacking there. But let's go back to the screen and let's look at some of its moveset. So it does have access to moves like First Impression, U-Turn, Superpower, it being Bug and Fighting. It is good against normal rock, ice, steel, dark, and grass. It is weak to flying. It is 4 times weak to flying, so definitely don't bring that in your any flying type Pokemon. It's also weak to fire, psychic, and fairy, and resist fighting, ground, bug, grass, and dark. Honestly, Slitherwing is okay. I have seen people bring it into raids. I don't see it very often. It is definitely more common and more prevalent in, say, like the PvP environment. I think it would probably honestly be a little bit below or on par here with Iron Moth. We're gonna go ahead and put it in the B tier. I don't know if it's quite A tier, at least not for me. Some of these Pokemon I haven't really used that much. Definitely haven't used Iron Thorns much at all. Iron Jugulus I find to be inferior to Hydreigon in basically every way. Springtail, I have a supportive build for it with skill swap for Terra raids, but nothing too special there. Then we look here up at C tier. These are all pretty solid Pokemon. They're all pretty solid as their Paradox Pokemon. They all have 570 base stats and some pretty good offensive and defensive stats in some degrees. Brute Bonnet being pretty good there. Roaring Moon is pretty fun in PvP. Sandy Shocks as well. And then Iron Bundle and Slitherwing, if you're good with them, are pretty good. I think Iron Valiant, Great Tusk, Iron Treads, and Iron Moth are a step above that. And then at the very tippy top tier, obviously we have the 2 Legendaries. If you want to just not count these, put them in their own tier, that's fine as well. But I think Iron Hands and Flutter Mane kind of speak for themselves. They're very good in both competitive and in PvE. Again, thanks guys for coming and watching this video. If you found it enjoyable, do leave it a like. If we get 15 likes on this video, we'll do another tier list. Leave me down below a suggestion on a tier list you guys would like me to cover. I do have plenty of VGC content on the channel and a whole lot more tips and tricks and raid builds if you guys want to check those out. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video or the next live stream. Thanks for coming by, and I'll see you in the next one.